Hey everybody, it's Steve Garvin and Gemma White joining you for another Heart-Centered Entrepreneur, our Conversations for Entrepreneurs. And today we're going to be talking about my process for creating. And
Yay.
I'm actually going to turn the time over to Gemma, who's going to be our maestro today.
You're gonna what? You're gonna try it out on me?
No. I said I'm going to turn the time over to you so you can
Okay.
be our maestro.
Okay. All right. So, do you want to talk about your acronym and what it means? Oh,
Sure.
let's get rid of that. Okay.
So my acronym is Lovers, Lovers. And one of the things professionally in the past I did was I did a lot of analysis and systems design and so forth. And so it's kind of funny that, here I am in the creative space and I'm coming up with another system in order to make sense of kind of the madness of it all. And the thing that I realized is that I tend to go through the same process every time I create something. And one of the ways that I've seen that is I do this daily journal writing thing on 750words.com. And over the past 3 years, I've written something like 856,000 words or something like that.
Yeah.
But each day, I start out with a blank screen. And it doesn't matter that I've done it, I don't know how many hundreds of times before, but it's always kind of daunting to have that blank screen in front of me. Have you ever experienced that yourself?
Yeah, of course.
Oh my gosh.
Bit of commotion going on there. every time I go to create something, like especially when I wrote a lot of poetry, there was always, the blank screen that you started with, and depending on your mood or levels of inspiration, I'll just keep talking while Steve does something. Depending on your mood and level of inspiration, it's kind of like the blank page can be kind of exciting, or it can be daunting, or it can be a number of things, and I guess I used to deal with that with my poetry through just getting something down, like even if it wasn't perfect to start with, like just getting a few lines, some ideas happening, and then and then I'd refine them. Like I'd keep all the notes that I'd made, and then I'd start again, like start the poem again.
Mm-hmm.
As I wrote, I refined it and got closer to the idea that I was trying to express. Yeah.
I came across a couple of quotes on that subject, and the what people who are writers or artists of various sorts have said is just that, inspiration is for amateurs type of thing, that, if you're waiting for inspiration to strike, then, honestly, you might be waiting a long time. One of the things that I discovered in doing my 750 words, and I do this not only when I'm writing, but also like when I'm creating, drawing something, is that I just put something down on the paper, and just get started and see where things go from there. And but I really like what a lot of people who produced an awful lot of work have said, in that, it's just a process of write. And that's where my first letter in Lovers comes from, is just letting go and, just, don't feel like you've got to have an outcome that comes out of it. I mean, not like a specific outcome, that you just kind of start moving your fingers on the keyboard or on the pencil or whatever, and you just let things flow. And as you do so, that things will open up and you'll get the ideas, and the inspiration will come as you're working.
Yeah.
It's a lot of times we think, that we need to start out with that inspiration, but oftentimes the way it works out actually is the opposite, that the muse doesn't show up until we show that we're willing to engage in the game. So, or the process.
Yeah, for sure. I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about how it is that process of showing up. And even if you just, like, I think you said there was some artist who, like, or writer or someone who was trying to show up every day, and sometimes all he'd do is read the paper, like, because he was so blocked on that particular day that he couldn't, actually write anything, but he was still showing up, and making space for something to happen. And even if nothing happened, it didn't matter. It was just that they'd shown up, And I
Right.
might read, yeah, I might read those wonderful quotes that you found. So yeah,
Sure.
you were saying inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. That's Chuck Close, painter. And show up, show up, show up, and after a while the muse shows up too. That's pretty much what you were saying. And a self-respecting artist must not fold his hands on the pretext he is not in the mood, which is Tchaikovsky. So yeah, that's just
right.
further emphasizing what you were saying, I suppose. Yeah.
Right, and they're all from different creative expressions. I mean, obviously, Tchaikovsky's music, and I don't remember the two other people, but just the painter and an author and so forth. So, and even when I'm noticing as I'm kind of building my business that I'm going through the same process, that I've got to let go and just start doing something. I don't, if I wait for everything to like be settled down and have all the right answers, then it just doesn't happen. So that's the L part of it. The O part of it is just opening yourself to inspiration, and it's, and intuition they go hand in hand. It's not like, there's a finite line between the two, but as you get out of your own way and allow your muse to show up, then it comes. And it's really interesting for me. It seems like when I've done interviews in the past, it always seemed like the first 15 minutes are like the hardest part. Just getting kind of the ball going. And then once the ball got going, it just flowed, and I could talk an hour or whatever. And it just worked really well. But again, it's just, showing up and letting things kind of come to you as you're working. And, it doesn't matter, again, whether I'm doing business or doing an interview or doing an illustration or something. But as I work on it and as I open the possibilities and kind of the different threads that are coming, that things start showing up and working. So
sure. And I can relate to the building a business, and kind of for a long time I wanted everything to be perfectly aligned and sorted in my head before I started. And then I got some business coaching, and the first thing that the lady told me was, she's like, you're not going to have it all. You're not going to have it all planned out. Like, you don't have to have it all planned out. You just need a starting point, from which to build something, and then it'll refine itself as you go. You don't have to. And it was such a relief, because I've been trying to work things out in my head, and you can't work everything out in your head when you haven't even started doing anything, And
right.
yeah, and it's only since I started doing calls with people and running workshops and stuff that I have more of a kind of direction. And I'm like, oh, because you get feedback from real people giving you feedback, which is great as you work with people and stuff. Because you don't get feedback when you're kind of in your own head. You only have your own feedback, which is not as helpful, I think, sometimes.
Right. And that's kind of the challenging part too, is that, we tend to think that well, like you said, that we have to have it all figured out. And but the thing is that uh, when we put something out there, and it always feels a little bit vulnerable, like things we've talked about in the past. You know, that when you let yourself show up and be who you are, that there's always a little bit of risk involved. You know, it's like, what are people going to think? And what if I don't have it right, or things like that. But if you don't do it, if you don't put it out there for people to respond to, then there's no way to get that feedback. And you might find that you're heading totally down the wrong path, or down a path that nobody really cares about, because you haven't engaged them in the process. So even though you think of creativity as being kind of a solitary process, it's really ripe for it being more of a collaborative effort as well.
Yeah. I mean, especially like for a business, because you need to make sure there's a need for the thing that you're creating. And I think even now for people that, artists and musicians and people that create stuff, art products, even for artists now, it's like you need an awareness of your audience, because there's so much stuff that people can buy and choose from and connect with, that it needs to be something tailor-made for a niche kind of, some kind of niche within your industry, because otherwise it's like, well, who's going to connect with it, So,
right.
I don't know if you get what I'm saying there.
Even when what's that?
I just went on a tangent there, so.
No, I think it's right on. And even when I'm creating stuff that's just that, it's not necessarily a business, it's just an image or something, I'll oftentimes, more often than not, share with my wife or my daughter or something, in order to get their opinion, on the way it looks, or the way it sounds, or whatever. So it's nice to have that feedback. And it doesn't have to be like a large group. In fact, oftentimes it's great if it's a small group. And one of the things that reminds me of is a conversation with, well, not a conversation. It was a book that I was reading, and it was about two comedians, one of which I don't remember, and the other being Steve Martin. And when they were getting started, and even now, and I really wish I could remember the other one, but he starts out in some little dive comedy club in New Jersey somewhere that, only has a handful of people, and they oftentimes like pretty brutal with him. But he starts out with like just the nucleus of an idea of something, and sees what happens with it. And he's able to refine it, because he's shared it with people. And we're kind of already going through the process of like all the different letters in the acronym. So so maybe I just ought to lay it out. So it's L is for letting go, O is for opening intuition, V is for viewing your direction. So, you have an intention in what you're doing, but you don't have it like down. You have it just kind of muddling away around in your head. And then the E is for expressing yourself. And then it's like we're talking about now is, refining what you do. You kind of do your first draft, and then, you share it with people, and which is the S part of it. And, you get feedback and figure out how things are going. But, and as you do that, things get better and better, instead of, just having kind of a rough draft of something that you end up with something that's much better. And I mean, it's a continual process. It's continual improvement, because it's not a done deal. Even if you're doing a single image, the fact that you did that one image, you might not do that image again, but when you go to do the next image, you're able to build upon what you did before. You know, it's not like you lose it. You might not be doing the exact same thing, but you've kind of like developed that mastery, if you will. And the more you do it and the more you share it and get it out there, the better it becomes.
Yeah, I often think of like a lot of the creative things I've done have been kind of like mulch or like compost for other creative things that will come out, that will grow out of it later on.
Right.
So I agree,
Yeah.
like I don't think anything's wasted. And I think there's always a connection between what you've done before and what you do in the future, and you know, creatively.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and when I go back, it's kind of interesting. When I go back and read stuff that I've written before, I'm always pleasantly surprised by how good it is. But when I go back and like look at my old illustrations, it's like I cringe every time I see it. It's like, you know, and maybe that's because I've been writing a whole lot longer than I've been drawing and illustrating. But it's kind of frightening to go back and see some of my early stuff. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't done that early stuff, right? I mean, if I hadn't started it out at some point, you know, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Exactly.
And that reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen that Ira Glass.
Yeah, I watched it.
Or whatever. Did you? Yeah, I really like the. So he has Ira Glass has a video called The Gap, and in it he talks about how when we start out in something, we tend to have like really good taste for things. So, you know, in visual arts, you know, we start out thinking of, I don't know, whoever your person is, but Norman Rockwell or Pablo Picasso or Rembrandt or whatever. Or as an author, you think of Stephen King or, I don't know, I can't rattle off the names easily.
The guy that wrote Ulysses, but, you know, some
Homer, yeah. I had to wait. I couldn't get through that one. But you start out and you're just kind of mesmerized by what they've created. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons you start out in you know, your creative pursuit, because you've found something that you really like and it resonated with you, and you say, you know, I want to do something like that. But then you try doing it, and you, as Ira Glass says, you know, when you start out, you kind of suck at it. You know, I mean, it's like when I was talking about, you know, doing my illustration first, that it was just kind of, you know, flat and wasn't very. I didn't like it. Although I was more okay with at the time. But there's that gap. So like between where you are and where you're like where your ideal is, and you want to get to that ideal, but you can't get to that ideal without being there first, right? Without starting somewhere first, you know, and then when you start there and you start, you know, going from there to, you know, as you progress on your journey, that you get better and better, and you close that gap between who you are, what you're able to do, and what you want to be able to do.
Sure. And I think there's that thing of like having the courage to be crap at something. Yeah. Because no one really likes being crap at something, but that's like usually the starting point. And I know it definitely was when I started writing poetry. I wrote the most terrible love poems. Like they were terrible. But you know, yeah, Violets of Moon. Yeah, no, but I just kept going, and I entered some of those crap kind of poems in competitions and everything because I didn't realize they were that bad at the time. And then I was always like, why aren't I winning?
I did that with my photography when I first started doing photography. It was I did these horrible, awful photos, and I'm like, why doesn't anybody like them? and it makes me cringe. It's, you know, but again, if I hadn't started out doing crap, and if I hadn't, you know, started there and put in the time to get better at it, you know, I wouldn't have gotten better at it. And I did have to put in the time. It wasn't like, you know, I went from 0 to 60 in 30 seconds. I mean, I went out when I was really spending time with photography. I went on every morning, literally at 6 o'clock, and just, you know, shot for an hour or two. You know, and part of it was learning how to use my camera. Part of it was, you know, how to play with light, how much, and part of it was, you know, composition and all those types of things. But if I wasn't out there every morning and playing with things and experimenting and doing things like that, you know, I wouldn't have improved. I would have stayed at crap level. Because I mean, you've got to work with it. You've got to put in the time.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I'm finding this with music at the moment. I want to be a musician because I kind of did poetry for about 10 years, and now I'm trying to kind of drift into music. And it's always a challenge, like not to make the practice work, like to make the practice fun somehow. Because if it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm just going to be like, this is shit. I can't do it. Blah, blah, blah. You know, so it's that. Making it fun and having like an immense amount of patience with myself when I'm making mistakes and, you know, not doing things perfectly and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I definitely relate. I definitely relate to being at the beginner stage again.
Yeah. And it is a challenge to like start out. I think you kind of have to have a passion for it to begin with. I don't know. I mean, can you bring on that playfulness when you're not enjoying it? I'm working on, I actually started writing a book today.
Oh, cool. That's just, you just slip that in there like it's nothing, you know.
Well, I've done that so many times now. It's like, but what it is, it's the entrepreneur's playground, and so it's, you know, kind of going off the idea that I've been posting my Facebook group, and someone said, well, that's not a great title for a program, but it's a great title for a book. And I've always wanted to, I mean, I've been tossing around ideas for writing a book anyway, but while I was doing it, I was like, you know, I just really don't enjoy this process that much. I don't enjoy writing the writing process that much. What I enjoy is having written. And I've read so many authors that say the same thing, that they don't, that the writing process isn't what excites them. What excites them is having written. You know, it's having created that final product. Because it's a lot of work. I mean, people talk about writing as if, you know, they use analogies like bleeding on the page and, you know, things like that, where they're just, you know, putting their heart and soul into it. And it's not like this easy process. But, you know, if they're not willing to do it, if they're not willing to put in the time, even when it's not necessarily fun in the moment, that, you know, it doesn't happen, that you don't get the finished book because it's, or the, you know, finished song or the finished illustration or whatever, you know, because it's a lot of work in the process.
I feel
but there
like
are things that I mean, I love illustrating and I love going out and doing photography. Although I guess initially it wasn't so easy, but even while I was developing it, it was something that I enjoyed doing. So I just think it's interesting that there's like these different experiences with different things.
Well, yeah, definitely. Like, I've always, from when I was a child, I always drew things and painted things and did creative stuff. And so my first art form was, you know, visual arts. And that was a very natural thing for me to do. Like, I was just expressing myself because I was quite a shy child. So it was my way of emotionally kind of having an outlet. And then, like, I moved into writing. And so, you know, painting and writing were always there. like I could do them fairly easily, and so I think I naturally drifted into those first, and then music is like the last thing for me to try because it's one of the most challenging for me. So I had to kind of be ready. I had to do all these other things first before I could kind of start tackling this thing that I've always wanted to do, but it always felt a bit difficult or a bit scarier than other art forms. So it is interesting how we can have different relationships to different art forms. Some come more naturally and some feel more difficult for whatever reason, or they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're jumping in with both feet. I mean, you were out open mic hopping the other night, right?
Yeah, it was really good. Like there's such a there's so much stuff out there, and I'm only just starting to engage with this stuff because I live in Melbourne in Australia, and there's so much arty stuff going on all the time in this city, and I think it really helps to I've got to find my tribe of arty people to hang out with and be inspired by, and because at the moment I don't know that many musicians, so it was really cool to go out and meet some people who are passionate about that, and it kind of lights that passion for me as well, because I remember, oh, that's right, singing is fun, and writing songs is really fun, and then there's once you start going to things like that, like people start kind of nagging at you to get up on the stage and kind of do something and show what you can do, and that's really motivating to me. Like I need that kind of pressure, or what's it called, accountability, I suppose, from a community, because it's similar in with poetry open mics. You go to open mics long enough and eventually you want to get on stage and share what you have because you've heard, it's kind of I don't know, it's like a very community-based thing in a way, like it's kind of you're all in it together kind of thing, because getting on stage is kind of scary, so it's like there's support or something from a group, I think, in those situations.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you get up on stage the other night when you were out?
No, I'm just like going to check out the scene. I'm trying all these different nights and trying to see which ones are more suited to beginners, because I don't want to put myself somewhere where I'm going to be like, oh my God, that was the worst thing ever, to experience. I just want to do it gently because I'm being protective of my creativity and my inner child, and I don't want to shock it out of shock it out of its brain or something. I just want to like do it gently as I can handle it, kind of thing. So yeah.
And I think that's important too. I mean, there's an element of getting out there and getting feedback, but if you do it like too soon, then you can squelch that creativity too, because you get feedback that isn't great, or you haven't built that confidence or that assurance in yourself that even if somebody doesn't like it, that you like it and you're comfortable with it, that you're willing to keep going forward even if it isn't ideal at the moment. And you find your people too, right? Just because one person doesn't like it doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. So
and I think there's something to do with I'm getting an echo. I think there's something to do with having confidence that you can do better, that you have that ability to improve inside you. You have the potential to be really good at it, and that, and that's where that confidence comes, because it's like, okay, I might suck at the moment, but I know that if I keep going, I'm gonna, have that potential to improve. And I think that's part of believing in your own creative abilities. And I think that comes more after you've done a number of creative kind of things. It's like through experience, you're going to improve. And it's only like a matter of time and practice and, stuff.
Right.
Stuff like that.
As you've done that, and it's interesting how that translates from one thing to another too. Like, you know, writing or illustrating or photography, or, you know, those experiences there, you know, have given me the more the confidence and the willingness to go out in business on my own, you know, because I know that, you know, when I started out, I wasn't, you know, terrific, but as I put more time into it and put more myself into it, that it turned out. And so, you know, I wonder how, you know, your drawing and your poetry and so forth have kind of formed a foundation for your ventures into music.
Yeah, I think you do build a kind of creative confidence, like I was saying before. And you realize that it's kind of like you think back to another, like whenever I feel a bit shit about being not great at music, I think back to when I started poetry and how I wasn't great when I started that, you know, or back to visual art when, you know, I started doing that, I was a beginner. So I think it gives you experiences that you can draw on, like analogies, I guess. I guess it's an analogy, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it definitely gives you experience that you can draw on and kind of go, it's okay. Like you can kind of like, what's the word? Like calm yourself and go, it's okay.
Reassure yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean you've been there before. It's kind of, yeah. I mean, maybe not in the same way, but as you gain skills in one area and you're able to translate that into another area, that, you know, it gets easier to go into those other areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because, I mean, professionally, you know, back in the corporate days of my life, you know, what happened is you tend to get more and more special. And so instead of, you know, expanding out in different creative pursuits, you just got more and more particular on what you do. So I was working in the accounting department, finance department, and I went from, you know, being general and doing everything to being where I was responsible for, you know, keeping track of inventory or keeping track of the warranty or whatever. And like something very, very narrow was what I had to do, because it was, one, that's how you get paid better, by getting more and more specialized. But when you're creative, you know, either as an artist or an entrepreneur or whatever, that it actually pays to have a wider variety of skills than a narrower one. So, which is why I enjoy this process a whole lot more.
Yeah, I think
I like dabbling in lots of things, not just, you know, sticking in one corner.
Yeah, and I think a lot of creative people are like that. You know, there's like, I don't know, for me, there's like a need for variety in the work that I do. If I'm just doing one kind of narrow thing, I get really bored and then I just don't want to do it, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good.
So do you want to recap your acronym one more time? I don't know if we talked about all of them, just to kind of finish up.
I think we have touched base on all of them. So again, it's lovers, LOVERS, and the L is for let go. The O is for open to intuition, or, you know, kind of let the muse come on. V is for, you know, view your direction, that, you know, you don't just like go wherever, but you have kind of a direction that you want to head. And then E is express yourself, you know, start getting stuff down there and start opening up and letting yourself create and, you know, seeing what happens out of it. and finishing it too. I mean, a lot of times, we start out with one thing and we don't finish it because we get bored or we get, upset with ourselves or we get distracted or whatever. But I think part of that expressing yourself is allowing yourself to finish it too. So that you can get it out there and share with people. And so I actually did S before R, but the R part is, as you finish it, that you go back and you refine it. You go from your rough draft to, your first draft to your second draft and so forth. And I think the important part to note here too is that I think those are really, really important to me, and I'd like to get your opinion on it too, is that, that you finish expressing yourself before you refine it, that you move from the creative element to the editing element, and you don't have them happen at the same time. I think you've wasted a lot of energy and a lot of time when you're writing a sentence and you're like, well, that word wasn't right and I need to change that word, and not, all this type of stuff that, I think it's really inefficient actually to do that. It's kind of like the inefficiencies of multitasking. And so when you're being creative, be creative, express yourself and finish that process, and then go back and refine it. And then the next piece is to go out and to share it, and see what people say and see how people respond and and then, you go back and either, start something new, or you go back and refine again what you've got, or, whether you use the feedback that you're getting in order to create a better product, whether it's a new piece or just a renewed version of what you've got. So
I definitely agree with the not editing too soon. I think you have to be really aware of what your own process is. Like if you're trying to edit while you're trying to create and you're not getting anywhere, then stop editing. Like I know when I wrote poetry, I would sometimes edit at the same time, but I was very aware that I was doing that and it was for a particular purpose. But I know a lot of people, when they try to edit at the same time, they're not doing it consciously. It's because their inner critic is kind of going crazy and like running the show. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So
yeah.
I think, just allowing yourself, and that's like the letting go thing as well, is just allowing yourself to create and create and create and get that draft, done. And then you can go back and put your editor's hat on and, do it and refine it. But and it's funny because some people like are overcritical of their own work and other people are not critical enough. I feel like they don't refine things at all before they share them, and that also can be a problem when you're creating art. So I think having the R where it is in your kind of Lovers acronym is crucial, because it's like, it's, yes, you need to refine something before you share it, but then it's like, don't let that refining process jump up the acronym, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. You don't want it to be too soon in the process, because then you never end up with a finished product, because you're constantly doing that I don't know, dance of we're saying it's never good enough because you need to keep refining it. And I think there's also a time to like let it loose too, that you can refine and refine and refine, but there's a time to say, I just need to let it go, and get it out there and share it with people.
And I think there's a place for having like close creative kind of comrades, I suppose, that you can really trust as like the first people that you show things to, and they're going to give you like good feedback and fair feedback, and they're not going to like rip your heart out, like like with their really harsh feedback, because I think those I think it's worth having people that, just a few people that you can show stuff to, but it's still a little bit vulnerable and a little bit like raw, and they'll be kind, they'll give you good feedback, but it'll be kind of like kind feedback. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're kind of breaking up right now, but yeah, I think it's good. Who is it? I'm thinking of the poetry circle that was in New York in Greenwich Village. And now you're totally frozen.
Oh.
Are you there?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I think so. So, but yeah, there's like a small cadre of people who were supporters for one another, and they spurred each other on, but they also criticized each other's work in order to make it better.
Yeah, I think that comes back to community, the community aspect of being an artist. Having support.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Because I mean, if you're not open to other people, then you end up like Emily Dickinson with 100 poems in her desk, and nothing ever gets published until after she's gone.
You end up
and then everybody loves her stuff.
You end up a crazy poetry lady in an attic somewhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So go to those poetry slams.
Go to the open mics, for God's sake.
Exactly. You don't end up a crazy poetress or whatever. Poet. Yeah. Well, good. I've enjoyed this conversation as always.
Yeah,
you can find, for the people who catch us here, you can join us in our Facebook community, Heart-Centered Entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Or, that's probably the best way to connect with us right now.
Yeah.
So.
And hello, if you're watching the recorded version of this, and it's been good.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.